Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Corey, and welcome back to Coach Barnabas. This is episode 28, and you may remember if you were tuning in before, episode 27 was before vacation, and I did suggest that it was possible that I might record some episodes or do some add some content while on vacation, but clearly that did not happen. So I apologize, but I did bring back some inspiration that came from vacation. So I kind of want to share that with you as we go. And that's what this one's going to be about. We just kind of let you in on our vacation plans. We have family in Munich, so we flew over to Germany, and we spent the bulk of our time there in and around the Munich area, which was awesome. It's a beautiful area. The temperature and the weather was perfect. It was like mid to high 70s most of the time. I think it did get into the 80s a little bit, but it was just perfect. It was beautiful, very comfortable. Just perfect in every way. Had a great time just running around and taking trains and walking around cities and just seeing some amazing things. But then we were planning on an excursion to Italy. So we spent 4 or 5 days in Italy. But the thing is that Italy was going to be considerably hotter, like Florida hot. Okay, if you've ever been to Florida, you know what I'm talking about. Hot, humid, sticky, sweaty, and all that. But absolutely gorgeous. We saw some amazing things. But my topic for this episode is not so much about what we saw, though that may come up in the future. Who knows? But really, you're going back to the temperature and the climate. It was just different. Nice, comfortable temperatures in Germany. Then we get down to Italy, and it was just crazy hot. And without belaboring that point, what I want to focus on is that in Europe, see, we're spoiled here in the States. Especially like I mentioned, Florida in hot climates, you're pretty much going from one air conditioned setting to the next. You spend a little bit of time outside, unless you work outside, or you're going to a sporting event outside, or something like that, where you're in some activity where there's no escaping it. You're generally going from one air conditioned environment to the next, whether from your car to a building, from your building to a car, from one building to another. It's generally, you're going to be in air conditioning, and it's a nice break from, the heat outside. In Europe, air conditioning is actually hard to find. It's very rare, in fact, to find air conditioning. And so when we were looking, in Italy and the places we were going to be visiting for accommodations that had air conditioning, that was important to us. We did find some. But we were in Florence, Italy. If you've ever been, man, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't been, you got to go. It's just breathtakingly beautiful. Going in July, maybe not the best idea because, as I mentioned, hot. Did I mention it was hot? It was hot. But we found, a hotel. I mean, just very within walking distance of the heart of Florence, right on the river, the Arno River, or River Arno, however it's properly addressed, but right there. And so, in bridges taking across into the heart of the city. I mean, we're just walking distance, just a matter of yards from it all. So our location was tremendous. However, the air conditioning, we were promised air conditioning, and there was in fact an air conditioning unit in the room. Not the most effective, I got to say. So it did take a little bit of the edge off, but it was still pretty warm. But we got through it. The next place we stayed was a little deeper into Tuscany, into what you've seen if you watch movies, TV shows, whatever. The rolling hills, the vineyards, and in olive groves, just absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. Hot, but we stayed at a B&B in the heart of Tuscany, and this place had very effective air conditioning, for which we were grateful, for which I was grateful. But it got me to thinking about just the difference in when you're in heat, or or let's look at the opposite. I live in Rhode Island. It's very cold in the winter, and to be able to have heating is important, uh, as far as being comfortable and not being miserable with freezing to death, or if you're too hot, to find you know accommodations to have. Thinking back to a couple hundred years ago when these things didn't exist, yet people got through it. But it's like in my head, it's like, how did they get through that? How did they sleep in the night when it's 90 degrees outside? It's humid. It's gross. I can't sleep when I'm that uncomfortable. So, my head does kind of think that way. Or think you're in this town of Florence, which was so significant during the Renaissance, and to think of Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or Raphael and all these other renowned artists and folks who are a big part of our history, living in an area where it was so hot during the day and would remain hot at night without having air conditioning and trying to sleep through the night. Seems like we're spoiled. I admit it, but my point in all of that is just to say, this is what the presence of God is, for us, is when we are surrounded by circumstances that can be oppressive, that can be very uncomfortable, very miserable, that being in the presence of God, the Bible repeatedly refers to the presence of God, the Holy Spirit, as a rushing wind or a refreshing wind. And we in church this Sunday, one of the songs that was during our worship set had the words in it that you may know the song, but the lyrics were, "The atmosphere is changing now because the Spirit of the Lord, the presence of the Lord is here." And it is so true. When you're in the presence of the Lord, it changes things. Literally, the atmosphere changes and your perspective changes. And when you enter into the presence of God, you don't have to be somewhere special. I used to think that, you had to be in a particular place. You had to be in a particular posture. You had to be on your knees. You had to do this. You had to do all these little things to accommodate the presence of God. And that nothing could be further from the truth. You could be in your car. You could be out in a field somewhere. You could be in a church. You could be at work. You could be anywhere and be in the presence of God. And the point is that, as I was just thinking about that, it's like wherever you are, no matter what you're going through, when you stop and recognize and invite the presence of God, it is refreshing to your soul. Like being sticky hot and walking into an air-conditioned room and just that blast of refreshing, cool air. And that immediate sense of, you just have to almost say that, or you take a nice drink of lemonade. What do? You take a couple big gulps of that, you gulp it down, and you just go, right? It's the same concept when you are in the presence of God, that there's just this sense of relief and comfort and peace and all these things. And I also believe that the presence of God isn't limited to a place. You don't walk in and out of it tangibly, but you bring it with you. You can be immersed in the presence of God. And no matter, even if you are in motion and you're going from one place to another, like I said, you could be in your car, you could be going for a walk, you could go from home to your work, or whatever, from one place to another, and be immersed in the presence of God. And being in the presence of God will change the atmosphere wherever you go. And that people can feel a difference. They'll sense something different. And so I just, that's really that was just something that was prevalent on my mind over the past week or so. Just how important the presence of God is in our lives, and how we just need to not be, you can look at a thermostat and say, okay, wow, it's 85 degrees in this room right now. But then when you turn on the air conditioning literally changes the atmosphere and brings that temperature down to a more comfortable level. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, the thermostat of my life is too high and it's unpleasant, it's awful, your circumstances may not change. Okay. Turning on the air conditioning inside your home, your office, your car doesn't change the weather. Okay. It's not going to suddenly get cooler outside. You're just changing the atmosphere of where you are currently. Okay. So the presence of God changes you. It may or may not change your circumstances. Okay. You may still have to go through whatever it is you're going through. And sadly, we know people who are going through very, very difficult times. I mean, gut wrenching, you wouldn't wish it on anybody type circumstances. And the presence of God doesn't change them. These circumstances are very real and irreversible. But the presence of God can sustain you and carry you through these times. And you will find a strength that you don't personally possess, is not in you to be able to endure these things alone on your own power. But when you invite the presence of God into your life, when you're so desperate to be in God's presence that you just are willing to do what it takes to be surrounded by Him, by God's presence, you will see your ability. It's when I've gone through this so many times I can't even tell you, where I was facing something and it's like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. This is the worst thing in my life. And then you look back on it, maybe it takes you weeks, months, whatever the case is. And then you stop and you look back and say, you know what? God carried me through it to the point to where I got through it and it wasn't as overwhelming. There was like a greater strength than I thought I had. You see stories about people who, in a moment of crisis, can lift a car off of somebody who's trapped underneath the car, because the surge of adrenaline or whatever else gives them almost superhuman strength to do crazy things like that. It's not in their own strength. And they, when it's all over, they go, wow, I didn't know I had that in me to do that. That there's a strength that comes over you that's not your own, but it enables you to get through something, a crisis or whatever the case may be, in a way you couldn't have predicted. You couldn't have trained for it. You couldn't have done anything for it. It's just, that's what the presence of God does. It changes things. And you find a strength, and an endurance and a perseverance you didn't know you had. And you don't really have it on your own. You have to have the presence of God in order to sustain these things and to get through them. Doing it on your own, I don't even know how you dare go through it. And so many people fall apart and their families fall apart, or they end up, drinking themselves into, awful conditions, or drugs, or some, other, self-destructive behaviors. But when you just immerse yourself in the presence of God and just pray for His presence, and surround yourself with people who will pray for you and encourage you, that these things are just invaluable in order to see you through the darkness, to see you through the difficult circumstances, and it changes the atmosphere. And we also carry that with us. So if you know somebody who's in crisis, or just somebody who doesn't know the Lord, and you spend time in their home, whether it's for a couple hours or for a couple of weeks, and you just pray the presence of God to go with you and to be part of you, and that will change the atmosphere even in their homes, in their lives. That's something that we should be. We should bring the presence of God with us wherever we go. That literally changes the atmosphere wherever we go, not because of us, but because of God's presence. So that's my word for you. I hope it makes sense. But it really did to me. It was something that really impacted me. That's kind of how my mind works, is I see very, everyday things, but I see a deeper meaning behind them. And to me, air conditioning, it was something that was just, it was profound to me to think like how much I depend on it to be comfortable and to get me through things like sleeping through the night, or to just feel refreshed and not sticky gross, where you take a shower and you get out of the shower and you don't feel any cleaner because it's still so hot and muggy and sweaty and gross. But to have the air conditioning and just have that cool rushing wind just surrounding you and just make you more comfortable. And it's like, how much greater is God's presence? Same kind of principle. Is just like, I need him desperately in my life. I need his presence. I need it now because I'm going through an awful thing, or I'm spending time with somebody who's going through an awful thing and I don't have the words to speak to them. I don't have words of wisdom. I don't have anything that's going to change their circumstances. But what I do have is the presence of God. And I want to bring that with me. I want to usher that into their lives, into their presence, and change the atmosphere in their lives in some way, shape, or form. So that's I want to bring that to you. So I hope that serves as an encouragement to you. I hope you're encouraged. I invite you to not only be encouraged, but also be an encouragement. Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Take care now.